you for being here. I will be your co-host today alongside my colleague, Jennifer Ma, who is the Dean of the Faculty of Health Studies, and together we'll walk you through what's going to be happening today. So we'll be your MCs. Thank you for being here. Yeah.
I'm so much shorter than everyone else, so yeah, you can hear me though, okay? So I am Jennifer Ma. I'm excited to be here in our second Health Tech Challenge, so that's fantastic. And at this time, as we get started, I'd like to invite our acting president, Jill Matthew, to say a few words to start us off. So Jill?
Okay, I am a little bit taller than Jen. Can you hear me okay? Okay, great. This is awesome. There's so many people here. So thank you for joining us. Really appreciate it. And thank you to those that are online as well. So good morning, everybody. How are you? Great. Well, I hope that you learn lots today, and we're really excited to share some information with you as well. So thank you very much, Jen and Yelna, for the warm welcome. Really appreciate that. I'm excited to welcome all of you to Canada HealthSync Student Innovation Challenge. I know we will learn some incredible ideas and innovative solutions that will emerge from this fantastic event, leveraging fast healthcare interoperability resources, or known as FHIR. I think that's the right acronym. I would like to start by recognizing that this competition would not be possible without all of the hard work of many contributors at NorQuest and beyond. But also, it would not be possible without the support of our incredible partners. Thank you to all of the incredible organizations that have made this event possible. And they include TechNation's Career Ready program, Canada Health InfoWay, Canada Student Work Placement Program, and all the other organizations that are generously supporting us in 2025. Your contributions are essential to fostering innovation and empowering the next generation of problem solvers. I am also thrilled that we will be joined by some leading experts in Edmonton's vibrant innovation ecosystem. Executive Director at TechNation, Elaine Husing. Can you just raise your hand? Good morning. Welcome. Senior Director, Security at Canada Health InfoWay, Rob Martin. And Rob and I go way back. We actually used to work together at PricewaterhouseCoopers. Katrina Ingram from Ethically Aligned AI. And Katrina is right at the back there. Great to see you again. Alyssa Lefebvre-Skopak, Director of AI Trust and Safety at AMI. Is Alyssa here? Oh, there you are. And you're on our Workforce Advisory Committee too, aren't you? Yes, so welcome. Great to see you again. And of course, our keynote speaker, which I mentioned, is Robert Martin, Senior Director, Security Canada Healthway Info. So another wave from Robert. So Robert will be speaking a little bit shortly. The goal of this competition is to find innovative solutions to challenges in improving how healthcare providers share information across the country. This is really near and dear to me because we have one of our daughters is actually in the healthcare field. So we're very proud of the work that NorQuest does, and I really look forward to hearing what some of the outcomes are of this challenge. Today, we are exploring how technology and innovation can transform healthcare delivery. How can we leverage our region's abundant healthcare and innovation expertise to improve the efficiency and effectiveness of information sharing among healthcare providers nationwide? And how can we ensure these solutions remain sustainable for future generations? We are asking students from across the country to combine their knowledge of health, technology, and sustainability to address real challenges faced by healthcare providers and our communities. Making a meaningful impact in the community is at the heart of what we do here at NorQuest. Our programs are designed to provide learners with the best tools and opportunities to succeed. So what does this mean? This means staying ahead of current trends to ensure we deliver workforce relevant education. As we see the growth of AI and machine learning, we've adapted in response. Our machine learning program is the first entry-level diploma program in this industry, and it is growing really fast. Its graduates will go on to apply the kind of innovative solutions dreamt of by problem solvers like you guys. Initiatives like this challenge emphasize NorQuest's commitment to supporting the healthcare system. Our goal is to make an impact, not only through education, but also by building strong partnerships with industry and our communities. And that impact is well underway across Alberta. For example, our focus on improving rural health means our learners are filling the gaps that exist across our province. We're creating more healthcare options for people to access and age in place in the communities they call home through innovative mobile lab in we have an innovative mobile lab in Castor, Alberta, that is providing some of this educational healthcare support to our students and to the community. That dedication to increasing training programs in rural communities helps decrease barriers and improves outcomes in healthcare for the aged. Our Health Studies Faculty Certificate and Diploma programs train learners to fill many frontline roles. This is how we are truly making a difference in improving patient care and helping people stay in their communities. Improving the quality of life and the quality of healthcare for Albertans starts with a high-quality education. NorQuest learners will be difference makers in their communities, in the projects they choose to be involved in, and the innovative ideas they bring to life. I am so proud of all of you who have chosen to take part in this incredible competition. We are excited to see what innovation and creative solutions you develop and the meaningful, lasting impact of those solutions that they will have on our communities. So thank you very much for allowing me to come and share a few welcoming remarks. And I think it's back to our MCs.
All right.
Get back.
Sure. While Mariam's doing that, maybe I'll just do a bit of this. Oops. So thank you, Jill, so much for these welcoming remarks. I would now like to welcome and introduce Brett Hotus. Brett currently serves as the Executive Director of Future Workforce Development Strategy at TechNation, which is Canada's largest technology industry association. He has led the organization's student work placement program, which Jill referred to, its Careers Ready, for the last 6 years, stewarding over $250 million in funds from the Government of Canada to ensure that young Canadians are met with equitable and inclusive career pathways into STEM careers. He and his team are currently focused on work-integrated learning programming streams that focus on AI and indigenization. Brett.
A lovely introduction. Thank you very much. Bonjour. Hi. Tanishi, everyone. My name is Brett. I'm originally from Treaty 1 territory in Winnipeg. I am of mixed settler Indigenous heritage. I'm Red River Métis through my mother's side and Irish Ukrainian through my father's side. And what I think that says about me is that I'm a very sort of classic Manitoban. And I always love coming to Edmonton because I sort of see Edmonton as a sister city to Winnipeg. Like there's just lots of similarities. We all have to put up with minus 40 degree weather in the winter and 30-degree heat in the summer sometimes. So we're a hardy people, quite resilient. And yes, I work for Tech Nation. I lead our Career Ready program, which is the initiative that has sort of linked and brought us all here today. And we are pleased to bring you the Canada HealthSync Student Challenge. And I as well would like to begin by thanking our partners here at NorQuest College for hosting us, for being really incredible partners, and for always taking a partnership approach to this relationship, which has brought us into our second year of planning really compelling and interesting student challenges for you. And that goes right down to the logistics and all of the event planning and coordination that goes into making this happen. As well to the event sponsor, Canada Health Infoway, who really is spearheading a lot of the conversation that we'll be hosting today and is central to this challenge. And as mentioned, but I just always really need to reiterate, because they've given us $250 million to make some really, really incredible and impactful work. But this project is funded in part by the Government of Canada's Student Work Placement Program. So to bring everybody up to speed, we'll do a quick little level set on the state of health data interoperability in Canada. There is very limited interoperability across our entire healthcare system, or healthcare systems, as Elaine might point out later. Patient records are not easily accessible to patients or providers. I'm from Manitoba, I mentioned. I lived in BC for a period of time. I moved back to Manitoba. I moved to Ontario, and now I'm back in BC, and I live in Vancouver. And my healthcare file does not follow me around to all of those different places, which is quite challenging. And I wonder about my own health safety and security sometimes based on that. Although I'm very blessed to be in good health, there are a lot of folks who need that level of detail. There's a lack of consistent data sharing frameworks, which I'm sure we'll get into as well, which certainly does impact patient safety, as I mentioned. And central to this conversation is Bill C-72, which is a bill that was introduced. We'll talk a little bit more about that, but essentially to help remove some of the barriers to data access and data flow, and to develop interoperability standards across Canada. An overview of the bill itself, it's called Bill C-72, Connected Care for Canadians Act, was introduced to Parliament to enhance data health interoperability and enable digital adoption. I think that's another sort of focal point of this within Canada's healthcare system. It would help ensure that IT vendors are brought into this process, and they wouldn't, to enable the interoperability, of course, but also to ensure that there is no participation in what is called data blocking. And data blocking is just something that refers to any practice that prevents, discourages, or interferes the access, use, or exchange of electronic healthcare system, electronic health information. Hope I got that right. And I'm sure that'll a good definition of terms for y'all for right now, because it's going to come up in the panel discussion that we have for you later today as well. What else? Yeah, the challenge, of course, very central to Bill C-72. It's a very clear connection, and it certainly was inspired by the bill that was put forward to Parliament. It was introduced by the Federal Minister of Health, the Honorable Mark Holland, on June 6th, 2024. I can remember reading about the details of this bill probably sometime in July, maybe by August. And that was about the time we reignited our conversation with NorQuest. What are we going to do for a challenge, in the next couple months? So that just sort of paints the picture, doesn't it? Like, we've been putting in a lot of thinking and planning to go into this challenge. And of course, there's been a lot of recent political developments that would certainly be impacting any bill in with the House right now. So some of you, I'm sure, are wondering what's going on with the prorogation of government, and how does that impact health interoperability in this particular bill in Canada. And we look forward to bringing you more details of that discussion in the upcoming panel. So just to replay very concisely, 4 key goals, I think, that the impact of 4 key goals and impact that Bill C-72 sought was to improve patient safety, enhance health access, enhance access to health services, establish a common interoperability standard, more secure, connected, patient-covered, patient-centered healthcare services, and just to make sure that there's reduced barriers and red tape and bureaucracy when it comes to putting the health of Canadians first. So with all that being said, we all kind of are all on the same page with regards to the bill and kind of the goal of the challenge. I'd like to move into the challenge logistics. There's various sprints in this challenge, which I think kind of make it more engaging and more exciting to follow along with. So step 1, registration and ideation. That runs, I think, kicking off today up until February 5th. You can form teams of 2 to 4 people. You can join a team through the platform that TechNation offers, or you can create your own. Each team will need to identify a captain, and that captain can from that point invite additional team members. I find just a kind of a tip is if you have somebody who has a strength, or if they're in a business program, it could be helpful to have somebody from different types of programs join your team, because then you have more interdisciplinary approach to developing solutions. So you might want to consider that as well. Just a personal tip. You can register and submit a 5 to 7 page slide deck to introduce your team and your ideas and proposed solution. And the deadline for that first sprint is February 5th, 11:59 Mountain Time. The top 25 teams will be selected to move on to stage 2, which is the development stage. So we ask you to lean into your original proposal, and that will run about a month from February 8th to March 9th. That stage, teams are paired with mentors at that point to assist you in further developing your ideas. We don't expect you to know absolutely everything in this topic, but we do expect you to work with our mentors to help sort of refine your scope and help develop and build out your idea further. It'll give you the best chance at advancing to step 3 as well. The key deliverable anyways for this stage is a 3 to 5 minute video presentation demonstrating your solution, the technology behind it, as well as the market that it's serving. So that, again, those are different outputs that require different, disciplines and, different types of people that have different strengths based on their programs of study. So, think of that and how you can best leverage that and make that serve you. All submissions must be in English and should be submitted to the platform by 11:59 March 9th. And the judging stage will occur right after that, from March 10th to 12th. So the whole team involved with this project and the jury will review and decide on 5 teams that would be chosen to advance to the finals. The finalist teams will receive notification by the evening of March 12th. That brings us to step 3, the final pitch. March 24th, 2025, right here at NorQuest College, I believe. Between March 12th and the 24th, so you get about 2 weeks, the top 5 teams will refine their solutions and prototypes. We love seeing prototypes. And prepare a 5-minute presentation, including a brief demonstration on their concept or product. The finalist teams will pitch their solutions to a jury at the hybrid event on March 24th, held right here. Perfect, check, check. And teams can attend in person or present virtually. It's up to you. Winners will be announced right at the end of the event. Prizes include, we all like the prizes. The top team would receive $2,000 to each team member. That's each team member. Second place is $1,250 each, and third place is $750 each. So a lot on the line. And before I turn it over, I just want to also mention I'm just fascinated with this particular topic, and I think it's probably one of the most interesting and unique challenges that we've developed over the years, and we've done probably over 60 over the last 6 years or so. And I really see it as an opportunity for you to start sort of thinking and playing in this environment. Yes, the progress of this bill and of this interoperability policy has been slowed down by the prorogation of Parliament. But you're ahead of everybody doing the thinking behind what is this going to look like? How do Canadians stand to benefit? And by the time you graduate, and by the time you get a little bit of experience in the workforce, before you know it, you'll be working for PwC or something, and you'll be the ones actually working with the government and all of these consultants, like making this actually happen. And you can look back 5 years, 10 years ago and say, I was thinking about this a long time ago. Here are my thoughts. So that's all I have for right now for logistics. I think we have a few more words to share before we move into the panel. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Brett. Lots of information there. But I think the first one was get your team together for February 5th. Is that right? So yeah, look at your interdisciplinary team, I think is what Brett was recommending. So you have some different ideas and different disciplines there, and it'll make it more robust. So thank you, Brett, for sharing all of those timelines and the background related to it. And now I'd like to introduce our speaker, Robert Martin, who is the Senior Director, Security at Canada Health Info Way. So Robert. I'll adjust it, sorry.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here. This is something that is very near and dear to my heart, something that I quite get excited about, just like Brett. I'm going to try and keep this to 5 minutes and hold me to that. In probably early December, my friend and co-panelist in a couple of minutes, Katrina Ingram, mentioned that she was working on this event, and she thought that it might be interesting to me personally, but also to the organization I work for, Canada Health Infoway. And within about 30 seconds of reading the pamphlet and the information that was already published for this event, it seemed absolutely that we need to be involved. And it's right in line with what Canada Health Infoway is all about, which is probably a question that a lot of you have. So about 20 years ago, the federal and provincial and territorial governments in Canada came together and formed Infoway, which is a not-for-profit organization, gets its funding from the federal government, just like TechNation. We are governed by the ministries of health from the provinces and territories. They tell us to advance the cause of interoperability in healthcare in Canada. The first iteration of Infoway back in 20 years ago or so was a bunch of money to advance digitization of diagnostic images, so x-rays, etc. The next iteration of Canada Health Infoway was to design, implement and continue to govern a national electronic prescribing service called Prescribe It. That solution is in doctors' offices and pharmacies across country, and we're now deploying to hospitals as well. The goal of that program is to, through the magic of interoperability, is to have a prescriber in any facility in Canada be able to prescribe a drug to a patient and have that prescription transferred to a community pharmacy for dispensing. The pharmacy that makes sense for the person, for the patient. Getting rid of the paper and getting rid of the headache and the doctor's writing and the illegibility of the handwriting, and make it more efficient. Like what Brett said, getting rid of that administrative burden. We had lots of success with that and continue to deploy that solution. But a couple of years ago, our board of directors said that we really need to be advancing the cause for cross-continuum of healthcare interoperability in Canada. And so with our partner organization, CIHI, we released the shared pan-Canadian digital health interoperability roadmap, which we just call the roadmap for obvious reasons, in May of 2023. And that outlines a lot of what is now codified in Bill C-72, the Connected Care for Canadians Act, which is around ensuring patient access to information, reducing the barriers for the providers, working with Indigenous groups, working with patient and caregiver groups, but also working with vendors and industry partners, which is where I think the connection comes into this event. As an aside, next week, InfoWay is hosting an international conference called the IHE Connectathon, focusing on bringing organizations from across North America and a delegation from Europe into Toronto to learn about interoperability and learn about what some of the lessons learned and success stories for the various implementations across the world. On top of that, there is a sandbox event where organizations and industry partners are going to be able to bring their technology together to see if they can actually work and interoperate between disparate companies. If you look at the agenda for the Connectathon and the Plugathon next week in Toronto, and you look at what this challenge is presenting with, there's a 100% overlap between what the problems that they're trying to solve as industry organizations and what you're going to be bringing forward to the challenge as well. So the problems that you're working on are the same problems that are being worked on by vendors in Canada, the United States, in Europe. These are the problems that the governments want to solve. These are the problems that the healthcare providers want the assistance on to reduce that burden in their environment. So it's extremely exciting. I'm looking forward to seeing all of the energy, enthusiasm, and the innovation that you can bring to this. Like Brett said, this is something that is a long-term journey. This is not something that's going to be solved in one challenge in 1 year. But I think this is a great start for your careers, and I look forward to working with as many as you as possible and seeing what you bring forward. So thank you very much. Good luck, and looking forward to working with you. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Robert. We are getting ready to get into our panel discussion. So I'd like to invite Brett back up, and then we'll be introducing the rest of the panel.
Okay. So I'd like to introduce the panel for our fireside chat. Katrina Ingram, the founder of Ethically Aligned AI. Elaine Husing, the executive director of Health Tech Nation Canada. Robert Martin, the senior director of security, Canada Health InfoWay. And Alyssa Lefebvre, sorry, I apologize. Director of AI for Trust and Safety at Alberta Machine Intelligence Institute, otherwise known as AMI. Thank you all for coming up for that.
Yeah. I'm just going to steal the end because it's kind of a moderator spot. Perfect. And I was given time in advance to get this microphone fired up, and it sounds like I'm coming through clearly to the audience. Excellent. All right. Well, we're pleased to bring you a really interesting panel discussion on today's topic with some different leaders from across this particular space. And why don't I just pass the microphone along one by one, and you can just remind everyone of your name, your position, and a little bit how you became involved in health interoperability.
Well, hello, everyone. My name is Katrina Ingram, and I run a social enterprise called Ethically Aligned AI. I'm based here out of Edmonton. How did I become involved in this? Well, it started back in 2018 when I went back to school to do a master's degree and found myself really getting involved in the world of AI ethics and responsible AI. And as part of that work, I chose to do my work in the area of healthcare because I think there's so much potential for some of these technologies when it comes to the upside, but also a lot of risk when it comes to the downside. So that's how I got involved in this area.
Hi, everyone. I'm Alyssa Lefebvre-Schkopitz. I'm the Director of AI Trust and Safety at Amy. I've been kind of similarly in the AI space for close to 5 years now. I worked at Alta ML, I worked at the Responsible AI Institute, and joined Amy at the beginning of January. And my portfolio has had a lot of focus on health. So today I'm hoping to share all of my learnings. I'm also have made a lot of mistakes, and so I'll share those as well. So hopefully you can learn from that, and looking forward to the discussion today.
Once again, Robert Martin, Senior Director of Security at Infoway. I was a cybersecurity professional for many years, and the biggest game in town 15 or 16 years ago was Capital Health, which then became Alberta Health Services. And before that, I was with the Ministry of Health and Wellness. And I guess just through that, wanting to work on a very large scale cybersecurity, you become ingrained in the business, and the business in healthcare is interoperability and making things work together. So that's how I got involved, and I joined Infoway about 13 months ago.
My name is Lane Husing, and I am the Executive Director for the Health Division at TechNation. I have done this kind of work all my career, so it's now spanning over 35 years. I didn't think I would stay all that long, but I just am very passionate about it. It's working with great people like this, and something like AI comes along, and it's just like, whoa, whole new spin on things, right? So, so I've been working with a bunch of stakeholders from across Canada since the beginning that we started talking about the importance of interoperability that goes past decades. And we're going to talk more about some of the obstacles that we've come across and where we are today. So I'm excited to hear from all of you and learn from all of you. Thanks.
We'll have to pick up on a social enterprise conversation because my connection to Edmonton is my master's degree had a satellite campus at NAIT. And so my master's is an MBA specializing in community economic development. So to pick your brain later. And excellent. Well, thank you for your introductions, and we'll move into the first question, which I think sets sort of a very good foundational context. What are some of the most significant obstacles to achieving health data interoperability despite having the technology for decades? I call that a popcorn question, so anyone can kind of pop in and address that.
It's really one of those, technology is the easy part, I think, is what you have to really recognize. And we've had technology to make these things work for years, maybe decades, definitely decades. The real issue from my perspective is the willingness to make it work, right? The fact that we as security people need to protect data, but we also have a mandate to really be enabling the sharing of data. And I think that perspective of protecting and holding things back is counterintuitive to interoperability. And I think we need to understand that there's risks to manage, but there's also a massive benefits. And I don't think we can get where we need to go with healthcare in Canada if we don't share the data.
Go on. Did you want to go? Okay. I think of two things. So number one, data is also very hard. It's a mess. And when I think of kind of the multimodal nature of AI and the way that data is structured, we have so many different types of things that we can use and that we can share, that it's actually, the technology exists, but it's also somewhat challenging to manage all the different types of data and make it consistent, especially when you want those really big impacts. And then the second thing, and this goes to like mistake number one that I'll share from my experience, was it's really challenging to align incentives, right? So asking people in a stressed health system, they're overworked, they have a lot to do, and this is often something that's off the side of their desk or on top of the work they're already doing. It's really challenging. And I was very naively one time, I was like, think about how many more patients you can treat. And they're like, I can't even treat all the patients I have. So I very naively kind of assumed that this extra technology and work would make their lives so much easier. And I had to kind of approach kind of more of those conversations without assumptions that this technology was going to help them. Because sometimes it can be perceived, and the willingness is that this is an extra task for me that is outside of my remit. So just approaching those conversations without making assumptions that they're very excited about the solution you're offering.
And I would say too, we have to always remember that Canada is not one healthcare system. It is at the very least 13, right? Because we have 3 territories and 10 provinces. And within those provinces and territories, we have regions with different needs. We have hospitals. We have information systems, legacy systems that have been sitting there for decades and decades. And I think even when I was last having a conversation with folks like 15 years ago about legacy systems, we were like 90,000 across the country. So you take all of those disparate systems and you're trying to connect them. Holy Dinah. I mean, I'd love to be a part of one of those projects, big headache, but I think that was one of the obstacles. And then also legislation. So this is where we talk a little bit more about Bill C-72 and how, each province has to align their legislation in order for all of this to work. And I think the pandemic really put a fire under everybody's seats to re-examine this, because we needed access to data to help solve and all sorts of things with the pandemic and future pandemics. So there's always a silver lining with something that's really bad, unfortunately, but I think we look at what Infoway has started, and they're really leading with the Canadian Institute for Health Information, CIHI, which you mentioned before. These are really great opportunities for all of us too, and what you guys are doing and coming into the future. The future is bright, is what I think, but those are some of the obstacles I think we look at, and it kind of answers some of those questions. How come it took so long when we had the technology?
Yes, all of the above. And I'll add a couple of things. So just to pick up on what Elaine was saying, another layer to that story is your doctor. So think about your doctor as a small business. And as a small business, you go out there and you get whatever technology is going to work for your business. That's what I do for my small business. And there's not really anyone telling me that I then need to think about that technology working with some other technology to share some data. So you have all these doctors going out there running their small businesses. They're overworked, as Alyssa was saying, and they're not necessarily thinking about kind of this other layer of data sharing. So that's kind of another thing. The other thing I want to pick up on in terms of regulation, and this just happened recently, I was talking with a group of data scientists. I was talking about the challenges in obtaining healthcare data to do some of the work that they do. And they went off about lawyers and privacy laws and all of these kinds of things, which I think, have some benefits, absolutely some benefits for all of us in terms of adhering to the principles of privacy, but also are causing some real challenges in terms of how do we actually think about sharing data. And so I think that's another practicality in this. So there's all these other actors that have their role to play. And in some cases, that can also present another barrier.
I'd just like to further comment on the physician situation, because that was a huge barrier. And that was something that was really concentrated across Canada. Alberta did a physician office systems program back in the early 2000s. And that was to make sure that we had some type of certification for different EMR vendors that were selling to the office. But that cost, and it's a really good point that you made, that cost is bore by the individual doctor who runs his own business or her own business. And so another barrier to sell. How much more do I need to invest? I got to pay for my own receptionist, my IT, my, et cetera. So really good point.
So yeah, I think what I'm hearing is that it's kind of, maybe there's some irony to it, but we have had the technology for forever, but we live in a nation where our privacy and our data is so the security and privacy of everyone's individual data is paramount. Like, I think I've read studies or have seen countries ranked, and Canada's among the top nations for protecting privacy of its citizens. But at the cost of reduced innovation, and as I was saying kind of off the top, like we're compromising now potentially health prosperity, right, of the individuals. So, with regards to privacy and ethical considerations, when we think about the data, what are the biggest privacy risks associated with health data sharing? What, the government wants to protect us, like it makes sense. Of course, that comes first. But what could be a worst case scenario if these risks aren't mitigated? And maybe I'll begin and direct that question to Robert.
You're providing your data to your healthcare provider, your doctor, your pharmacist. There's a trust relationship that you have with them as an individual, with them as a professional. And what happens if that data leaves that clinic and goes used somewhere else? Or if it's amalgamated into a larger system and then somehow it gets re-identified to you? The issues here really are just around losing that control of the data. You as an individual, not necessarily as the providers, but where is your data? Who is it being accessed to by? There was a story maybe 10 days ago in the United States where lawsuits were going towards General Motors for all of the data that they were selling to insurance companies. How many times you slam on the brakes of your car. And so A, they didn't know that the data was being collected. B, they didn't know it was being sold. We obviously know when we go to our healthcare providers that our data is being collected, but we probably should have an idea of where the data is going, right? And if we don't have that idea, that then raises the concern of, not understanding if something like that General Motors issue with the car insurance is happening. And I think from a privacy perspective, it really is providing that trust so that people are comfortable with the fact that their data is going to be used in responsible ways for bettering the system and for providing care, not for things like advancing, a private sector interest.
This was many years ago now, I think 2019. There was also a kind of a scandal called Google Nightingale. And it was one of the second largest healthcare system in it was a US example, but they basically sold a bunch of personal health data to Google to use for AI, which is kind of my lens. And people didn't know, and it wasn't actually uncovered until there was a whistleblower. And so there's also this, risk, I think maybe not so much within a public healthcare system in Canada, but that it is used for ways that aren't intended. Like health insurance risk assessments or things like that.
I think it's good we're kind of talking about now these practical real world examples. And Elaine, I wanted to ask you if you could share any real world examples of how integrated health systems and data sharing could have improved outcomes for patients, researchers, or healthcare systems.
Oh yeah, I can, and and actually, it's close to your heart as well with your colleagues at InfoWay. So we have something that we call, and Robert would be able to speak to patient summaries much better than I could. You can see he lives and breathes this stuff with his colleagues, but patient summary. So when we talk about patient summary, and Canada Health InfoWay, along with Kai, been working on this along with the other stakeholders. So that would include ministry people, CIOs that run hospitals and digital health teams, technician members that are technology vendors. Patient summaries are put in place, and it's really I think as students going into this challenge, you should really kind of look these things up and really become knowledgeable about them. So a patient summary is the collection of data that is a minimal set. So a real life example would be you broke your leg, you were skiing in, I don't know, let's say Whistler, because we're all from Edmonton right now, right? And you go into the walk-in clinic or the emergency, they're able to pull up what we call your patient summary. So we don't need to know that you had your appendix out when you were 16 or that you had the chicken pox or anything. That we need a minimal set so that that care provider can provide you with the safest, most efficient health care to fix you, to give you these acute care healthcare practice, and also minimize costs in doing that, all that kind of stuff. And in about 2021, Canada and the other G7 countries. So we hear a lot about this in the world, in the news. The G7 countries committed to working together to put together an international standard of what that minimum data set would be. So imagine now you're skiing, because I'm thinking we all won the lottery and we're all skiing now in the Alps or something, or enjoying a nice vacation. You go into that emergency department in France. This is the potential of pulling up that same minimal standard set so that care provider can provide you with the best possible, safest healthcare and have best outcomes. So that to me is, I mean, I get all excited just talking about that stuff, but that's the outcome, right? Because at the end of the day, it's about you, the patient. And I want you to keep that in mind as you think about this challenge. It's about the outcomes to the patient, to you, to your family. Yeah.
And the International Patient Summary Standard is done, and so is the Canadian Patient Summary, Canadian version of that standard. So those do exist right now and are available on the InfoWay website.
Yeah, and so they're on the website. That's a great resource for you to go to Canada Health InfoWay, start diving deep into some of this stuff. And also the International Patient Summary has its own sort of group now, and it's got its own website. So I really encourage you to learn more about this, because this is key to the success of interoperability.
I was going to say, if you're taking notes right now, I would put like a big star next to that particular point, making sure that the data sets are reaching, the right people with just the right amount of information, depending on the case. Very, very important. And they're offering lots of different resources for you to cite as you're developing your solutions and prototypes. So we've been talking about Bill C-72, and it feels like there's been it felt like there was some stuff moving, and the Minister of Health, of Canada was the one that submitted the bill into the House, and so now, given that Parliament has been prorogued until March 24th, it's looking like we will be seeing an election called in due course thereafter. Can you comment on the state of that proposed bill? We know obviously it's kind of technically frozen or shot down for the time being, but maybe you could explain to us a little bit more about what might happen. Will it be reintroduced? Is it a priority? And maybe a little bit more about that data blocking and that was involved in that bill and what that pertains to.
Oh, absolutely. So again, thank you, Brett, for that introduction. So the Bill C-72 introduced, really, just for clarity, that is just so that we can make a rule of assent. So we would have a law. Okay, it helps the Health Canada. It's the law, to have Canadians have access to their health stuff. That data blocking is done by bad actors. It's all that stuff. So it doesn't stop what we're doing at all. It just means that act, we don't know. It can't be passed. It went through, I think, the second reading, but it didn't make roll assent yet because it didn't get put to the floor. Now, Bill C-72 could either be reignited as the way it was written. If it's a new government, I doubt it. They'll want to tweak it to their own liking, but I think Robert will agree with me. I know Michael Green, your CEO, and Attila Farkas, the architect behind the interoperability roadmap, both agree with me that probably something very similar will be passed eventually, but now we're not looking at that till 2026. But I do know that the different, including InfoWay and other stakeholders across Canada, have agreed already that no matter what, bad actors are not going to be able to participate in this, that everybody that's involved has said, yes, we go ahead and we're going to, on the goodwill of what we want to do. There's a comment in that act currently that says vendors cannot block data. That was not to be interpreted that vendors block data, but it's to make it so that it's law that they don't. Okay, so let's be very clear on that. Any vendor that would block data would have no opportunity to sell their product ever again in this country. Nobody would want to buy their product, and I think they would be shamed into nothing. But so those are just sort of the highlights. I'm sure Robert has some more to add to that.
It was very well received by all parties, and so I think we have a lot of confidence that regardless of what happens in the next election, we will have we will have Bill C-72 or something equivalent. And the thing I would add is that in any situation, whether it's AI or interoperability or any other sort of innovative technology, the vendor community wants certainty so that they know how to build towards. And once that bill was introduced, I think that signaled that there's the need for that, and that's the right signal. Whether the bill is passed or not, it's still a very large momentum swing for us.
I wanted to ask Katrina this question. Healthcare data, or rather, I had a little bit of a spin off of the original question, so I hope I don't surprise you too much. But I wanted to ask, what is the importance of that control over the data sets? Like we were just sort of touching on, like who has access to what at what times, depending on the situation. And, especially when it comes to safety, quality assurance, quality control, and enhancing, I guess, like outcomes for patient care.
Yeah, so this reminds me, when I was doing my own research in healthcare and AI, and I was talking to people who were building these solutions, I always got a version of the evil insurance company story, which we've already touched on here a little bit. And it basically goes like this. And then some evil insurance company gets a hold of my data and I, get charged more. I can't get insurance. Something bad happens to me. And I think what underlies that fear is this idea that somehow our data, if it's shared with the wrong people, is going to get weaponized against us in some way. And I think that's the core thing that people are really concerned about. And so when I think about data sharing and all the benefits that we can get, as we've outlined what they are, how do we have this societal conversation to figure out what the boundaries of that data sharing look like? And then how do we protect people so that their data isn't weaponized against them? I think for me, those are kind of the core underlying issues in this discussion that we're having.
Well, it's actually, I think, kind of a good segue into a question that I wanted to ask you is that, well, let me back up. I think one of also as speaking as an Indigenous person and working in future workforce development, everything that I do with my programs is so intersectional, and especially when it comes to working with Indigenous communities, like from a health perspective, from a training perspective, a talent perspective, from a workforce perspective, obviously. So I was kind of like to make sure that we are making sure that we center Indigenous communities and Indigenous peoples when we talk about data sovereignty and health, especially healthcare. So I wanted to ask, how does the concept of Indigenous data sovereignty challenge existing practices in healthcare data sharing, and what ethical responsibilities should guide these efforts?
Yeah, I'll let Katrina talk about the Indigenous data sovereignty a little bit more, but I just think generally when we think about bias in data and historical bias in data and the way it's been collected in the past, there is a lot of mistrust in certain communities because it has been weaponized against them. And we've seen, I'll just use the AI perspective. First of all, I'm pro AI. I'm pragmatic about it. I think it can, and Katrina's point, like it can solve so many problems, but there are risks. So because data can be historically biased and it's tough to manage, and especially if we don't have access to all the data we need from an interoperability perspective, we're at risk that decisions from AI tools deployed in the healthcare system can offer bias. They can offer bias against people of color, against age, historical data for research with women. Often, certain things won't be fair or equitable for different genders and sexes. So I think as much as access to data is really important, we have to understand the historical context of where the data comes from, and then the risks if it is biased when deploy it. We've also talked a little bit about, we have access to the data, but do we understand it? Do we have, I think from an AI perspective, again, we have to think about explainability or interpretability. So someone gets data, someone sees something, do they understand what it means? Do they understand the context? That's why this standard is so great, because knowing that there is one cohesive standard, you can train on it, you can learn about it, and you can understand what it is, what it isn't, and the context. And so sometimes we're fed data that we may not understand. And so in the absence of understanding or literacy, it's not actually as useful. So I think about those things just kind of when we think about equity and being able to leverage and maximize the utility of the systems and the data, and then hopefully eventually the AI tools that can improve our health outcomes.
Yeah, so I think when it comes to the term Indigenous data sovereignty, it helps to unpack that a little bit and then explain why it's important. So let's start with sovereignty. So Canada's, country, the United States is a country. We make our rules, we say what those are, we govern our countries respectively. And so if you think about that in data terms, it means that we get to set the agenda about what happens with our data. And so we abide by those rules as a nation. And so when we add the term Indigenous to that, we think about the various nations across Canada, the First Nations that we have, and the ability for those First Nations to set their own governing rules as it pertains to data. So I think it's really helpful to think about this as a government to government kind of negotiation. So that's kind of the first piece. Why is that important? It kind of goes back to some of the things Alyssa was saying about historical inequities, situations where various institutions, including the government, have gone into First Nations communities to do research or to do some other things. And then some data is collected, and that data is used for things down the road that aren't necessarily consented or agreed to. And so, especially when it comes to machine learning, which in a lot of cases repurposes data. So we go out there, we get data for purpose A, but we want to use it for purposes B, C, D, and E. And increasingly, because we need a lot of data, we're kind of looking at the ability to do that. This is why this conversation, I think, is really, it's been a conversation that I think has been ongoing, but it's really coming to the forefront now. And so there are groups working on how do we fix that? How do we actually ensure that we have control over our data? It's being used in ways that align with what our community feels they want to have it used for. And so one of those groups, and this might be a write it down in your notebook moment, is the First Nations Information Governance Center. And they have a protocol called OCAP, which stands for Ownership, Control, Access, and Possession. And it's a framework, it's a data framework to think about Indigenous data sovereignty. So that's another resource for you as you're thinking about data sharing and what that means in an Indigenous context.
Go for it, Aline.
Oh, thank you. So Technation, our health division, so technology members, have actually had a security and privacy framework that has actually been used across the country with different stakeholders. We also wrote it under the, sort of a review by folks at InfoWay and stuff like that. But we also talk about de-identification of data. And I know Robert will be able to speak more to that. So I sort of whispered, would you be able to talk? Because I think you would find this very interesting.
Yeah, the basic concept with de-identification is to strip out all of the information that obviously is about me as an individual, and it's a very tricky problem. And if you have a solution to solve that, whether it's through AI, machine learning, or something else, you're going to be very well off in the future. But de-identification really gives us the ability to collect the data in all of these different contexts, and then use the data like it's a 54-year-old male that weighs this much, has this blood pressure, but it doesn't actually say that 54-year-old male is named Robert Martin and lives at this address. It's very complicated though, and if the example I always like to give when I talk about de-identification is the Edmonton Public School Board had a situation where they were saying, well, we're just going to collect all this information about mental health for your child as she goes into kindergarten. But don't worry, it's going to be de-identified. And I called them up and I said, well, yes, but there's only one 6-year-old girl or 5-year-old girl in this postal code because there was the only one on our, and therefore it was not de-identified. It was very easy to re-identify. So the issue, back to some of the things that Katrina was talking about, is that building that trust to say that the data is not going to identify me and cannot be re-identified to be me through other mechanisms, which gets much more complicated as we bring together massive data sets from various places, and then use the great machine learning and AI tools to actually go through the data in a very responsive manner.
I'll just add to that de-identification and those proxy variables to be able to actually, reformulate the identification of someone. Then there's also this, we don't want to be biased. So we're going to remove all the data around age and gender. And then now all of a sudden the data set has it's not helpful. There's no utility. So you actually need to get those kind of protected variables that could potentially lead to bias. But people are like, well, if I give you that information, you could use it against me. So it's this really challenging friction of, okay, you need the data for the machine learning to actually be effective, but you have challenges around bias and fairness that there are machine learning and AI techniques to overcome. They're not perfect yet. There's still a lot of discussion about how to do them. So there's always going to be a little bit of tension about the trade-offs. And so what are the risks? What are the benefits? What can be mitigated? And frankly, sometimes how much risk are we willing to accept for the upside? So it's never an either or. It's never a binary. It really is about navigating that friction and the trade-offs.
I think we've got time for 2 more questions from this before we open it up to a Q&A. And I think for Katrina and Alyssa, since you're both sort of our AI experts and you're working with these data sets and data points all the time, in terms of, and we're talking about sovereignty, we're talking about privacy, we're talking about the ownership of data. Who truly owns healthcare data? Is it the patients, the providers, the systems? How does this affect how data is managed and how it's shared?
That's a hard question. I'll start. There's the legal answer, there's the moral answer, there's the philosophical answer. So I think it's a little bit of everything. I mean, in Canada, the health systems are the stewards, and then they conserve our data, and we have permission to access it. So that's one way. But Canada has a different view than, let's say, the European Union. They have a regulation called GDPR, which means that citizens in the EU have more rights to their data than they do in Canada. Are the citizens different? Are we different as human people? So, there's the legal answer. It can depend on your context, what country, which, legal regime you're under, and also kind of the ability to access the data and how it's used. So I don't have a perfect answer to that question.
I don't think there is a perfect answer
Thank
to
God.
that question. So this actually, I had a bit of an email exchange again when I was kind of doing my master's research with someone about this, because when I came into the topic, I was very much, yeah, it's my data. I own that data. But this person challenged me a little bit, and they said, you would not be able to recreate your healthcare record. There was a lot of public investment. There's a lot of things in that record that come out as a result of you engaging with the healthcare system. So you wouldn't necessarily be able to recreate it. And that kind of gave me a different perspective on it. And the way I'm thinking about this now, so this framework, a researcher named Lynette Taylor is doing some excellent work in this world of data privacy and thinking about data. She talks about it like this, and it really resonated with me. So there's my data, PII, my name, things that are really attached to me. But then there's data about me. And if you think about a lot of the healthcare information out there, it's data about you. Right now, you could make data about someone else, and it's not necessarily PI. So that's kind of another circle. And then the last piece is data like mine. And this is where I think machine learning comes in, because it's trying to find patterns in data. We're trying to cluster things and know things and classify things. And so all of those areas become really pertinent. And so it muddies the question of ownership. I'm not even sure if ownership is the right way to think about it anymore. Is there a different way to think about it? I don't have a perfect answer for that either. But I think it's a great question. I think it's one that we should be having conversations about.
I think I'd add that the answer to your question, Brett, is yes, right? I mean, I own my data, but so does the physician that they own the record. They have to have ownership of the record. The health stewards, custodians, or whatever, they have requirements to own that data, as does probably everybody else involved. It is not maybe ownership, but it is, I should have control over the aspects that impact me. is probably the right answer, or the right wording maybe.
And some people might also tend to assume or wish that there were almost like I'm trying to think of like a way to describe it, like a social contract. Like we all exist in this nation with a social contract that we're, you know, going to be kind and nice to each other, right? And or there's, you know, sets of rules that, you know, will have consequences for you, right? So it's almost like I wonder if, you know, most people would sort of subscribe to the social contract that like my data's everywhere out there anyways. Like, but when it comes to healthcare, it's like the assumption or the social contract is take whatever data you want, but, you know, provide me with like efficient, effective medical services whenever I need it, as we have the right to access.
And I would agree with everybody that's talked already. And I think ownership is probably, maybe eventually we'll come up with a different term for it, right? But it is about control. And I also believe that with that, there's a risk too. Like you might sit there and say, well, I want to own my data, right? And we've had these discussions. This has been going like for decades. We've talked about who owns the data, you know, who's responsible for the data, who's liable for this data. So think about this is, you know, if you're advocating for your ownership of your own data and you aren't responsible with your own data, who are you going to blame? Who are you going to call, right? Because you can, you know, you want ownership and control over all that. And somehow you go to somebody, oh, sure, use my data. Who's responsible? Who's liable for that? So it would be on you. So there's lots of stuff in all of that. So I really appreciated all of your answers. That was great.
I just want to make a comment about social contract. It's really interesting. And I think it's going to come up more and more. Like I watched a video this morning of Sam Altman, who's the CEO of OpenAI, talking about how we're going to have to renegotiate the social contract. And I come to that with a little bit of skepticism about, again, incentives. What is his incentive for us to all renegotiate the social contract, right? To make our data more accessible. So I'm not saying I do think it's going to happen. I think as we become this data connected, AI driven world, we're all going to have to think about our data as an asset that we use or don't use or things like that. But I also encourage people to think about the incentive structure. My sister's needing help, so I had my phone on me. I'm sorry. Think about the incentive structure around some of these things when your data and your health comes into play. So.
Thank you, Alyssa. And I swear I didn't see that that interview this morning. It was just something that popped into my head. Well, we're going to move into Q&A, but I want to ask one question that will help all of you in the audience. So if you know, get ready, put your big star, circle it. If you were to design a successful solution to health data interoperability, if you're putting your sort of student participant hat on, like what would be some of the top priorities that you'd make sure that you would want, that you would like to address, and what are some of the obstacles that you might anticipate?
I think we spend so much of our time focused on the providers, and I think we need to spend more time focused on the patients, right? And that is one of the pillars of our roadmap, and the focus areas is patients and caregivers. And I think that the navigation of the healthcare system and the complexity of the healthcare system makes it harder and harder for people to figure out what they really need in this. So a system that will build off of interoperability and allow the providers to do what they need to do to treat you, but also the researchers to get things better, but also with that patient, family, caregiver focus, I think is really important. I think the other thing too is back to the Indigenous data sovereignty. There's an absolute, well, we're starting to say in Info now there's actually 14. There's the yes, it's not just 13, because the 14th is Indigenous, but of course there's 634 nations, so it's a lot. Having some sort of way of building that trust so that we can have the Indigenous communities get the care that they need without you know, the, I don't know what the right word is, the, you know, the legacy history of absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to refer back to something Brett said that I really loved. He gave you some advice to build interdisciplinary teams. I think that's so important in so many different contexts. So when I think about the work that I do, I always talk about this idea of a socio-technical perspective. So there's the technical stuff, which I'm sure many of you in the room are probably really, excellent at, but there's all of these other pieces that we've been outlining, whether that's laws or the business side of things, the practicalities of how to get things done. And so I think that's great advice for you on your teams, but I also think that's great advice for us in terms of how we address problems like the ones that we're talking about. And so how do we talk a lot about engaging stakeholders, but how do we do that well? And how do we ensure that these solutions that we're building are truly informed by an inclusive approach? And so when I hear that question, this is my dream scenario, right? How do we actually have that conversation at this bigger level with Canadians? So that's my thoughts on that.
I'll just build on that because I've been helping people adopt technology for 15 years. And the biggest piece of advice I can give is it's not about the technology. To both of your points, we've had the tech for 20 plus years, right, to be able to do this. It's about people understanding what's in it for them. It's about, I keep saying this, it's about incentives. It's about being part of the process and feeling listened to. And so ditto to everything you said, but also just understanding that the solution isn't always it's not just a technical solution, it's a people solution, and change management and bringing people along the journey with you and understanding what's in it for them is as important, if not more, to these solutions. Yes, and we'll need a whole other panel on change management, but yes.
100%. Again, building off of what everybody said here, consider all these things that we've talked about, the importance and also the important role that AI can play in this. But one thing I'll leave you with from my perspective is a couple of years ago, Continuing Care Alberta actually did this incredible report, and it's called Interoperability Saves Lives. And I actually carried with me this time. I printed, don't kill me. Anyways, but just look it up. It was done by Alberta Virtual Care Task Force. I think it was also involved several people from Infoway, providing input and stuff like that. And it really adds in the human factor. So think of that, right? And that's what you were talking about. And then Robert also added in the caregivers. The caregivers don't necessarily need to be, we know this, right? As we're seeing aging grandparents, aging parents at home, the caregivers are also mom and dad, brother and sister, aunt and uncle, very much tying into our First Nations community and how they see the world and how we interact at that level with our First Nations community. So I think there's lots of things for you to look about. I do recommend Interoperability Saves Lives. You'll learn a lot.
Excellent. Well, we've got about 10 minutes, I believe, for a Q&A session. So if anyone in the audience would like to ask a question to either Katrina, Alyssa, Robert, or Elaine, or even me, if you'd like, I'm here too. Just please raise your hand and I'll bring you the microphone.
Who's going to go first?
There we go.
Right.
Excellent.
Thank you. Yeah. So we talk about a lot of data, right? Data, identification, security, selling, ownership, everything, right? So what do you think about the selling and stealing? Like the currently data, we use the Web 2 currently, right? And all the data stored with the other party, third party. Yeah. So when you talk about that, do you think these centralized system will hurt if we make that system where we can share the data to the whole country, where the 60 million people's data, more than 60 million plus collected at one place, and there is a chances of selling and stealing. We share the data to the not only medical, to the paramedical, insurance, everyone. We share the data with them, right? So you think that rather than using the centralized system, we can use the decentralized system to do that, like the Web 3?
Yeah, I don't think we're ever going to have a single system. I think the theoretical, maybe the laws of physics maximum for the size of a healthcare system is probably about the size of the deployment in Alberta Health Services, right? That it just gets too cumbersome. I think Ontario is too big as a jurisdiction to have a single healthcare system. And so certainly we're not going to mandate a system that will be exactly the same deployment between Saskatchewan and Manitoba and Quebec or whatever. So it's going to be disparate systems. It's not going to be centralized. We're not going to have a national health ID. We're not going to have a single repository for health information. So we'll be decentralized, which is exactly why we need interoperability, because the pharmacist sitting in their pharmacy needs to be able to receive the prescription from a doctor or another pharmacist in a hospital setting or in a GP's clinic, and those two systems aren't the same system. They have to be able to interoperate. So that's what I would say, is that we're never going to have that one single system. I just don't think that's going to work.
Just to add to that a little bit from a technical standpoint, federated learning, that might be, I'm not sure if you're asking a technical solution or how are people thinking about this, but that's something that's come up in some of the work that I've done. And it's this idea that the data can remain where it is. We will apply machine learning techniques to know something about that data, and then we'll send that learned pattern back to kind of aggregate in the model. So that's kind of a way where the data can stay in these disparate healthcare systems, but we can maybe get the benefit of having that model learn from all of these different systems.
What do you think about the Web3, the blockchain? Currently UAE and Estonia started making their healthcare system work with the blockchain. So like there is a totally decentralization, there like ownership with the patients. So if they want to share their like whatever information with the doctor or anywhere, they can share it. Otherwise, like it's okay. Like
in a situation where you have a small population in a small geography and you have the political will to disrupt every system and rewrite every system, I think that can work. And I think the Estonia model is really an interesting model. We are 13 or 14 or many different health organizations, and the amount of capital that would be required to redo everything, we could probably solve every other problem in the country with that level of investment. So I think we're probably going to adopt technologies like that, but we're not going to do a wholesale Estonia type model of rip and replace. I don't think. I don't see that at all. Yeah, I look forward to seeing your solution in this, because I think there's some great things that could happen. And one of the things that's really interesting is that as I approach the end of my career, I've seen all these things, and you're coming at it in a perspective of what's possible, and I'm looking at it as a perspective of all the things that I've gone through. And so I need to have those sort of perspectives pushed onto me. So I'm looking forward to hearing that sort of solution. I think that's fantastic. Don't listen to me and all the negative things. Absolutely.
Yeah, I'll add a little bit to that, and I'm not sure if it's exactly what you were looking for, but like in Ontario, I was just talking to one of the fellows that's been in our industry for a long time, and he's consulting with one of the in Ontario, they have health teams, and they're doing a connected care project. It's Michael Martineau. You might know Michael, yeah. And he's been through, actually, it's kind of a unique situation because he just has gotten over almost near-death cancer. And so he's also being represented as a patient who knows about digital health and has done that all his life. So it's a kind of a unique situation. He's working with these things, and it was one of these things where, every time we went to a different specialist, because in Ontario, it's much more decentralized than it is here in Alberta. Alberta and BC we're very centralized comparatively, okay, not that it's 100%. So in Ontario, he's working with his clients, but in his mind it was like, he went to another specialist and they're saying, well, we need to get an MRI, and he's like, I just had one. Like, how do I get that to you, right? So this is, again, think about the cost of giving him another MRI when he just had one, and then Michael being frustrated because he has to go through that whole process again and in a waiting, line system and all that kind of stuff when the result is already there. So, I mean, that's another thing that with interoperability and that kind of thing will really solve.
I just want to see if anyone else has any questions. All right. Well, I might, yep. But I also just want to say, like, just off of the first question, we're looking at like an analysis of foreign countries' healthcare system. We're talking like Web3. We're talking blockchain. Like, it is on, everyone.
So thank you first of all, and just to identify the bottleneck, if I understood correctly, as you mentioned, there are multiple complex healthcare systems that are currently being used all over Canada. And what our goal is to, are you looking forward to like a ground up system, or how do I put it? An upper layer system just to connect all the multiple healthcare systems that are already being used.
There was a question that,
in the
that Marianne had on the screen here. I don't know if you can get that back up there. There was a question up on the screen that said, I can't remember exactly the wording, and it sort of just gave that generic answer. And it doesn't have to be bottom up. It doesn't have to be a top layer. It can be whatever, right? The ecosystem, if you want to use that term, is complicated and filled with technologies. There isn't any one right answer. People are going to bring their perspectives to this. People are going to bring what they know from a technology perspective and their skills outside of technology to solve the problem. And I don't think there is any sort of rote way of saying that it has to be a certain thing. I don't think anybody's going to say you have to do it this way either. From my perspective and from Info's perspective, we're looking at this from an innovation opportunity, right? Again, don't look at me, the old guy that's, oh yeah, we can't do that. Look at it, it's like, well, how could we do this? Well, that's what you can bring forward.
But
And
pay attention to the scar tissue, right? Like I think that you're being self-deprecating. It's fine. But I also think that it is good to examine where things have gone wrong or where there have, to your point, been bottlenecks, and being pragmatic about some of the approaches as well as like what is actually feasible given the constraints. Because we can, pie in the sky is amazing. We need that level of innovative thinking, but it's also great to be like, what are the realistic constraints of the systems that the solution will be actually, viable within the ecosystem. So I guess your lived experience is extremely valuable. I know you know that, but
it shouldn't just bias. And the question there, how can healthcare providers improve how they share information across the country, right? There's no word in there to say by using this technology or this philosophy. Yeah.
All right, we're at the end of our time. I'm sure a few of us will be hanging around after, so you're welcome to come up and say hello and introduce yourselves. It won't earn you any bonus points, but so I'll pass it over to Helena.
Thank you, everybody in person here at NorQuest College and those who joined us online. I love the enthusiasm and the questions and the probing. This is very good. I hope everybody enjoyed today. You got some of the sort of foundations laid. And I also like to acknowledge and thank our panel, Alyssa, Katrina, Elaine, Robert, and Brett. Thank you so much. Thank you, of course, to Tech Nation Canada and Canada Health Infoway. Our audiovisual support team, so Alan, Joseph, Ken, Kareem, and many more, and countless people who actually work in the background to make today possible. So a big shout out to them as well. We look forward to seeing you again back here on March 24th. So more information about that coming soon. There's a ton of detail and dates available also on the Tech Nation website. So please visit that. And those who are here at the college, enjoy lunch. Hope you can hang around, have some conversations, get to meet some of our panelists, those who can stay. And see you in about 4 weeks or 6 weeks.